Ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves another UFC Fight Night to break down, and to be frank, it ain't all that. But we will take a look at all the fights on the main card, per usual. That's where we're going to spend the main thrust of our time. We'll breeze through the prelims and kind of touch on any interesting fights that we see there as well. But by and large, I don't know. Doesn't really blow my hair back. Taking a look, though, it's UFC Fight Night, Brandon Moreno versus Lone'er Kavanah. As you can tell, it looks like they've got some kind of weird AI picture going on here with the weird swirls and shit. Of the two guys, 7 o'clock Central Time, adjust accordingly. It's at some kind of arena CDMX in Mexico. I don't know what the hell that is. 6 fights on the main card, though. They've been doing that quite a bit of late. I don't know if that's going to be the new normal. It used to be only 5, and now it seems like they're all throwing 6 on there, but it's alright. Prelims, couple that I find somewhat interesting. First, the fight of the night, we have a middleweight, Damian Pinas versus Wes Schultz. We've seen Wes once before, so keep an eye on that one. Eric Silva, Francis Marshall. I don't know, don't really care too much. Regina Terrin versus Ernesta Caricate. I don't know how you say that. Who cares? We have featherweight bout, though. Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Javier Reyes. We've seen Douglas Silva de Andrade a couple different times. What about this old Javier Reyes that he's fighting? What's this guy? 22-5. He's got good experience. From Colombia. Coming off 2 wins in a row. TKO and a sub. Couple finishes. Interesting. How much younger is he? 8 years younger. Quite a advantage there. Douglas Silva has a little bit of an experience advantage, but honestly not as big as you might expect. So, fun fight there. Keep an eye on that one. Who cares? Bantamweight bout, we have Christian Quinones versus Chris Matinho. The only reason I even really give a shit about this one is because we've seen Chris Matinho several times. He got signed to the UFC for seemingly, I don't want to say a layup fight, but it was basically kind of was a layup fight for Sean O'Malley just to beat the fuck out of him, basically, and kind of show out. And he somewhat did, and then kind of kept him around as a punching bag, and then he went down to like one of the regional organizations that I think he used to fight for and put together a couple wins there. Then they brought him back to the UFC, I think basically to serve in a similar role as he did against Sean O'Malley for Malcolm Wellmaker, because then he goes out there and just gets absolutely nuked by Wellmaker. Technically not the greatest fighter ever, doesn't seem to be very physically gifted, just kind of a tough punching bag, more or less. Hate to say that, but that's kind of the reality of it. Going against a guy, though, in Christian Quinones, who has comparable experience and a comparable record, so we'll see there. I do think Christian Quinones is probably a little bit more physically gifted than old Matinho, so I do still think Matinho probably goes out there and gets murdered, but it's a little bit closer of a fight than some of these other ones. As you can tell, Christian Quinones is a minus 750 favorite, so the odds makers are stacking pretty heavy in his favor as well. We have Eileen Perez versus Macy Chasson. Not exactly like a stellar matchup here. Eileen Perez has a lot of attention because she has OnlyFans and goes out there and shakes her ass every time she wins. So, of course, that's going to get some attention. As far as fighting goes, I don't know. She's not exactly stellar. She's a gritty grappler, goes in there and locks up, like a body lock on chicks, tries to sling them around, press them against the cage, gets a takedown, gets some ground and pound. Going against a girl in Macy Chasson, who's a little bit bigger than Eileen, but I do think Eileen probably has the horsepower here. So I'd say Eileen probably goes out there and gets a decision win. She's a minus 180 favorite. It's not going to be a really stellar fight. Unfortunately, I could actually see that one kind of being a little bit boring. Eileen trying to get her down, pressing her up against the cage, remaining heavy, wearing on her. That's about it. Landing some little rabbit punches. Premier fight of the prelims, though, we have Ryan Gandra versus Jose Daniel Medina. We've seen Daniel Medina before. Ryan Gandra doesn't sound super familiar. Let's see what's up with this guy. 8-1. Okay, so he's making his debut after the Contender Series where he got a TKO win back in August. 30 years old, 8-1. 5 knockout wins, 1 sub, 2 decisions. Got 1 KO loss to his name. Going against a guy in Jose Chicho Medina. Chicho. 11-6, 8 KOs, 2 subs, 1 decision. Lost once by KO, twice by sub, 3 decisions. He's got 4 losses in a row. Yikes. 2 of which are finishes, 2 are decisions. Maybe they're giving old Gandra a toss-up here. That's a rough record. What's the odds? Oh, yeah, they have to be. Minus 850. So maybe take Gandra inside the distance. It seems like they're lobbing him a nice little fight here, setting him up so he can make a name for himself. Moving on, though, we're going to take a look at the main card. This is where, like I said, we're going to spend the main thrust of our time, where I actually watched some tape, did a little bit of breakdowns. First fight of the night, we have a bantamweight bout. We have Santiago Luna versus Angel Pacheco, however you say it. Santiago Luna, 7-0, all finishes, if I recall correctly. Pretty dynamic, explosive, fast fighter. He's only 21 years old, so young as shit as well. As I mentioned, he's explosive, throws very hard, very fast. A little hittable. He drops his hands when he throws. He was getting caught by Kwong Lee a little bit, or Kwong Lei, however you say it. Did seem to get wobbled, so I'm curious about the chin. I think he cuts a fair bit of weight, so that might be compromising it some. Somewhat reckless in his offense as well. Kind of goes to the berserker barrage type of thing, but he is crazy fast and explosive. So I think it generally pays off for him. He just has to be careful, leaving that head on the center line for people to counter, slip and counter, fade punches, pull counter, something like that. So we'd like to see a little bit more defensive kind of development, maybe a little more head movement. Going against the guy, though, an Angel Pacheco, 34 years old, 7-3, 5 KO wins, 2 subs. He's lost 3 times by decision. Got 2 losses in a row, most recently to Callan Loughran, March of 2024. So he's been out for a hot minute, almost 2 years by the time this fight rolls around. He's orthodox, a lot of throwing. Kind of notice he's using his shoulders and like his arms to throw a lot, not really like turning over in the hips and getting the twist in it that you'd like to see to generate a ton of power. But the straight and the jab was pretty nice, given how he throws it. You don't need a ton of hip turnover and stuff in that. You generally see it more with the hooks. A little bit slow, I did notice as well. So while Santiago leaves his head stationary to get caught, I think the speed is going to be what makes the difference here. I think Luna is significantly faster, probably a little more power as well, a little more explosive. So I would say he goes out there, puts Pacheco away. Loughran is landing on Pacheco, and I think kind of stumbled him at one point. So I think Luna should be able to put him away. It may be a boring decision, but ring rust, speed advantage, explosivity, age advantage. Luna's quite a bit younger as well, 13 years. I'd say he's getting it done. Next, we have a flyweight bout. We have Imanol Rodriguez going against Kevin Borjas. Imanol, another undefeated fighter. They show him as 1-0 there, but I actually think he's like 6-0. I think that's wrong. Yeah, 6-0. 26 years old, 5 KO wins, 1 sub. Most recently coming off 3 TKO wins in a row. Looks like it was Contender Series and then Fury FC. And then whatever this BSC was, that was the one that kind of caught my eye there just now. Budo Sento Championship. It's one I've never heard of. A lot of times I've seen some of these, like this Combate Global, Fury FC, stuff like that, just from looking at records on here. But that BSC one is one I don't think I've ever heard of. What did we notice? Orthodox, chin up, hands come away when he throws as well. Kind of swipes some of his punches like he's batting at you like a cat. But he is explosive. Hit a good lat throw from the clinch, one of his last fights. Pretty tight striking. He's not throwing or fighting like a super long stance. Kind of keeps it close. Lots of power, though. Decent low, decent front kick. Going against a guy in Kevin Borjas, who is kind of the opposite of that. He fights a little bit longer, kind of a lankier build as opposed to the explosive, like fire hydrant build of Rodriguez. 28 years old, 10-4, 8 KO wins, 2 decisions. Been KO'd once, subbed once, and he's lost 2 decisions. Most recently coming off the decision win over decision loss to Sumaderji, and then the decision win over Ronaldo Rodriguez before that. Orthodox, nasty right hand straight, good lead to the body. That was one thing I really noticed that I was liking a lot, was the leads to the body. And against an explosive power puncher like Rodriguez, if he's able to get that working pretty early in the fight, then as it develops maybe late into the second round, third round, I think that could start paying off for him. Good knees, I was noticing that as well in the clinch. He was even throwing him outside the clinch. Wrestling needs a little bit of work, has a decent jab. This is one that I think the odds are a little lopsided. I do think Imanol Rodriguez should be the favorite, but at a minus 480, I think that's a little lopsided. I think Borjas might have a little bit of speed advantage here. Fights a little bit longer, so he can stay on the outside, stay at range, chip away at Imanol, land the body shots and stuff like that. I think he should be like a minus 250, not a minus 480. So for the odds, I would actually play Kevin Borjas, however you say it. I do think Imanol should win. So for like the main event challenge, maybe I'd pick him. But the money is on Kevin Borjas. You can actually make something there with an upset. So we'll see. We'll see. Experience, level of competition, all that kind of stuff kind of goes in Kevin's favor. Next up, we have Edgar Chairez versus Philippe Bunes. Edgar Chairez, been around the block once or twice. 30 years old, 12-6. So not exactly a stellar record, but Felipe Bunes is pretty comparable. 30 years old, 12-6, 4 KO wins, 8 submission wins. He's been subbed twice, lost 2 decisions. Most recently coming off the submission win over CJ Vergara. And he has a decision loss to the champ right now, Josh Van, back in September before that. Kind of a sideways karate stance. Nasty stabbing jab that was really, really effective. I was liking that quite a bit. Nasty work with the lead hand. Very quick lead hook. That's actually what he caught CJ Vergara with and sat him down. And then proceeded to snatch up the choke. Wasn't exactly the most technical choke. He kind of got the forearm in basically across the jaw, a little bit under the chin there, and just cranked the piss out of it. But because Vergara was already hurt and tired and everything else, he was able to get to finish there. He had some good chopping low kicks against Van, the occasional front kick. I think he actually won the first round against Van, but then Van came back and proceeded to hurt him to the body and then was taking it upstairs. So durability might be a little bit of an issue for Chairez, but given the way he was able to stay in there and kind of fight his way back into the fight and not get shut out, I was actually impressed with that. Going against guy in Bunes, 6 years older, 36, 14-8. 2 KO wins, 9 submission wins, 2 decisions. Been KO'd once, lost twice by sub, 5 times by decision. So fairly well-rounded, experienced guy, but he also favors the submissions like Edgar Chairez. Coming off the decision loss to Rafael Esteban back in August. Things we noticed from my notes here, he's orthodox, upright, kind of lanky, thin build. He's pretty active, pretty squirmy off his back. He was getting taken down against Johnson, but he was throwing up the arm bars and triangle attempts and stuff. Very active there. And then eventually did lock up the arm bar attempt, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Did also, though, have his toes in the cage, which was helping him turn the angle and probably helped a little bit with the leverage. So don't like to see that so much, but good front kick, good low calf kick. He was working that with the rear leg quite a bit. Some nice straight punches. Had a couple shots going for the takedowns. Wasn't able to secure those. Seemed like he had a hard time running through Johnson, I want to say is who it was, but then would lock up and kind of back out and turn the corner, run the pipe, do all that kind of shit. Kind of the chain wrestling, was then able to finish the takedown. So the initial shot isn't the most powerful, but is able to chain it together fairly well and knows the technique. So not horrendous. I would say Edgar Chairez probably has this one in the bag. Yeah, he's a minus 350 favorite. Should have a speed advantage here, probably power. Grappling, it's hard to say. Felipe actually could probably maybe hold his own on the ground for a little bit, but Edgar with the speed and the power, maybe he sets him down with a straight or those kicks. He's working the low calf kick and then switches it upstairs with a front kick to the chin or something, and then locks up another submission. We could see something like that going down. Next up, we have Daniel Zellhuber versus Bobby King Green, whatever he's going as these days. I think it's changed a couple times. Daniel Zellhuber, young buck, 26 years old. He's 15-3. Had a couple big fights fairly recent in his career. 7 KO wins, 3 subs, 5 decisions, and he's lost 3 times by decision, never been finished. 2 losses in a row, split decision to Esteban Ribovic, and then the decision loss to Michael Johnson back in July there. Competitive fight. Who's texting me? Whatever. Competitive fight. Wasn't like it was a complete shutout there. I think a little bit of that was kind of the experience advantage that Michael Johnson had, some of the ring savvy that he was able to squeak that out. He landed some pretty big shots as well on old Zellhuber. He's a tall fighter, kind of stands upright, good lead hand, jab and hook, front kick, high and low. He was working the inside kicks, lateral movement. What the hell? Page unresponsive. We ain't trying to go nowhere. Relax. Lateral movement, circling a lot with Rebovic and switching stances. Good at pushing away and establishing the distance, shoving off the head. Dean Thomas was also touching on that in his last fight. I think actually it wasn't his last fight. It was one before that. It was the Esteban fight at Noche. Does leave his head on the center line as well, where Michael Johnson was able to counter. I think Rebovic, as the fight was going on, was landing some on him as well, and then some solid shots to the body, if I recall. Zellhuber throws a good rear kick to the body, though. He was working that against Michael Johnson, and I think he could land that against Bobby Green, potentially switch it upstairs and put Bobby Green out. We've got old King Bobby King Green, whatever he's going by, 39 years old, 33-17, shitload of experience, 11 KO wins, 9 subs, 13 decisions, been KO'd 6 times, subbed 3 times, and lost 8 decisions. He's most recently coming off a split decision win over Lance Gibson Jr., 2 losses in a row prior to that, both finishes, 1 KO and 1 submission. The KO to Mauricio Huffy was fucking brutal. Good spinning kick to the dome. Absolutely slept him out. Then he had a really rough stoppage against, I kept wanting to say Jalen Turner. That was a rough run. Ref should have been in there a little bit sooner there. He was eating a lot of shots that I don't necessarily think he should have. Stylistically, Bobby Green's very quick, slick striker, hands down, good jab, good at like slipping the shots and countering off of it. The ego is kind of a problem, I think, for Bobby Green. He gets caught up in shootouts and stuff that I don't think he should. And I think while I understand that the hands down is good for slipping shots and rolling with the punches and stuff, I think if he was a little more defensively sound and kind of conventional, I guess, in that regard, he might not have suffered some of the knockouts that he has or some of the losses that he's got on his career. Chin is starting to become a little questionable. I kind of think it's starting to fade a little bit for old Bobby Green. He's getting hurt more and more. And then the style that he fights with relies heavily on speed and reflexes. And, of course, as you get older, that stuff starts to fade. So all of that to say, I think Zellhuber gets it done. One hell of an age advantage for Zellhuber as well. I think he'll probably have a little bit of size advantage here. He's durable. Bobby Green doesn't have like one-shot KO power per se. So I think Zellhuber can stay in there, weather the early explosivity of Bobby Green, and then kind of come back late as Green starts to slow, work the body kicks, work the low kicks, land upstairs, and win probably a decision if I had to guess. But it's going to be a competitive fight. What's the odds? King Green plus 360. I actually think it's going to be a relatively competitive fight. I don't think Green goes out there and gets shut out. So you could potentially, again, see a big upset here. You parlay those two plus 300s together, you probably have crazy odds. Kevin Borjas, King Green. There's a 1972 potentially live dogs, but I do think both of the favorites get it done. It's just ones where I think the odds should be a little bit closer. Co-main event of the evening, bantamweight bout. We have Marlon Chito Vera going against David Martinez. Chito Vera, what to say about old Chito Vera, man? I kind of think his best days are behind him. He's 33 years old, 23-11. He's got 8 KO wins, 10 subs, 5 decisions, 11 decision losses, never been finished. 3 losses in a row, all decisions, all relatively one-sided. The Amen one, obviously the closest one out of them is split, but if I remember right, I actually thought Amen had that pretty clearly. What to say about Marlon that hasn't already been said? He's durable, slow starter, kind of basic meat potatoes type of fighters, not really doing a lot of flashy shit. He started to add a little more spin kicks and shit like that into his game in the recent years, but by and large, very basic striking. Wrestling, kind of non-existent. Jiu-jitsu is pretty dangerous, throws up some submissions off his back, has some good RNC stuff like that, some good threats, I should say, but not really even like a world beater in the jiu-jitsu regard. It's kind of durability and heart, I would say, are his 2 best attributes, which isn't saying a ton. Just doesn't seem to be progressing that much in his fight game, not particularly physically gifted. Has pretty good power. I think he lands clean. Maybe that's one of his better attributes, his accuracy or his ability to land where he wants. But even that of late seems to really be struggling. I don't know, man. I think everything that he struggles with, David Martinez does relatively well. David generally seems to start pretty quick. He's got good lateral movement, whereas Marlon Vera can get a little stationary. Good at blitzing in and closing the distance. He's a southpaw, David Martinez, so that always throws in a nice little wrinkle into the game plan there. People don't fight southpaws as often as they fight orthodox people, so they often struggle with that. For some reason, there we go. He's 27 years old, 13-1, 10 knockout wins, 3 decision wins, and he's got 1 decision loss to his name. Most recently coming off the decision win over Rob Font. Things we noticed, though, like I mentioned, the lateral movement, good lead kick and stomps to the thigh. He was throwing the rear kick to the inside thigh and the calf quite a bit. Given the stationary target of Marlon Vera, I could see that working pretty well here. It does lean back quite a bit as people are coming in and exchanging with them. He kind of will move laterally out and then kind of lean back. Marlon Vera's got a decent reach and fights somewhat long, so I could actually see him potentially catching David Martinez at the end of one of the shots there, especially if he chooses to move in while doing it. So you got to watch that. Hopefully he's working on that a little bit. But I do like the movement generally. I think it's hard to keep up with, and so long as his gas tank holds up, I think in this fight specifically, that could be a beneficial thing to have in his bag, his bag of tricks, so to speak, is the movement, staying on the bike, peppering Marlon Vera, maybe getting him frustrated, and back on the bike, circling out, getting away from him, lateral movement. Don't give him a stationary target to land because Marlon Vera hits pretty hard. But I think Martinez gets it done here. A little bit of an age advantage as well. Not a huge one, and it's early enough that I don't think it's going to matter a ton for both these guys. They're on the right side of 35, but I think momentum's in Martinez's favor. Physicality is probably in his favor. So we'll see. We'll see. I think they want the momentum to move that way. Then, last fight of the evening, main event, flyweight bout. We have Brandon Moreno, the assassin baby, going against Lone'er Kavanah. Kind of a weird matchup to me. This one really doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm a big Brandon Moreno fan, former champ, 32 years old, 23-9, 5 KO wins, 11 subs, 7 decisions. He's lost once by KO, 8 times by decision. Very well-rounded fighter. Like I mentioned, former champ, been around the block. He's fought just about everybody, had multiple wars with Figueiredo. He's coming off the TKO win over Tatsuro Taira, which I think was a little bit early, if I recall correctly, but he did get hurt and rocked pretty good. Stylistic things we noticed here of note. Where's my notes format? Here we go. Good scrambling, BJJ black belt. Good striking, though unconventional. He throws kind of some weird stuff, gets the hand out there and starts posting, doing some kind of funky things with the striking, but I think that works in his favor. Relatively quick, not a ton of power. Okay jab, high guard, and then kind of crouches down into it, leaves the body open a little bit. I think he's patient, has decent fight IQ. Sometimes does questionable stuff that I think when he was younger, he was able to get by on some of his physicality, some of his scramble ability and stuff. And now that he's getting older and slowing down a little bit, not getting away with it as much. But it seems like the fight IQ and the experience is starting to make up for some of that stuff. Going against the guy here, Lone'er Kavanah, 26 years old, he's 9-1, 4 KO wins, 1 sub win, 4 decisions, lost 1 time by KO. And that was his most recent fight against Charles Johnson, which is largely why this fight doesn't make a ton of sense to me. He was fighting a guy a little bit lower ranked in the division, Charles Johnson, and then gets knocked out by him. Somehow finds himself in a main event against the former champion with no real big wins on his record before that. This seems like pretty blatant favoritism, or like they are wanting to make a star out of this kid or something. This one just doesn't make any sense to me. Stylistically, we noticed the old Lone'er there. He's orthodox, switches well in his stances, got a nasty low kick. He's quick, he's reactive, very good reflexes, cat-like in his reflexes, you might say. Does like to drop the hands and slip, which will get him caught against some folks. I think Brandon Moreno, with his funky striking and the volume that he likes to throw, could potentially catch him there. And I think it's what got him caught against Charles Johnson, but I think here Brandon Moreno has a pretty substantial experience advantage. The level of competition they've been fighting favors Brandon Moreno significantly. Chin-wise, I would think would be in favor of Brandon Moreno, but they're probably pretty comparable here, both of them coming off the KO loss. I think the scramble and grappling ability goes in favor of Brandon Moreno as well. So I think this is one where the vet gets it done. Brandon Moreno's a 2-1 favorite here. I think that's actually about right on those odds. I just don't see how Lone'er beats him, aside from maybe clipping him and hurting him. But given Moreno's durability and his ability to wrestle and scramble and recover and stuff, I just don't see it happening. So we're going to go with Brandon Moreno here. Probably decision or a late stoppage I could potentially see. So you could maybe even take Brandon Moreno like 4 or 5 and then by points or something. Do a third of a unit on all of them and you'll come out on top. Something like that. I think you'll be all right. So that is it. Another UFC Fight Night in the bag. Like, comment, follow, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are on the fights. If you got any bets that you're going to play or any that I'm just dead wrong on, let me know. And we'll see you guys next week for I would say a pay-per-view, but a numbered card because they're not pay-per-views anymore. Fun one there. UFC 326. BMF belt on the line. Holloway versus Oliveira 2. We'll see you guys next week for that one. Peace out.